Thanks so much for coming to this evening's panel session on advancing child-centered AI practitioners and partnerships. And to open it today for us is Vidhya Ganesh, the Director of our Division of Data Analytics Planning and Monitoring. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for coming. These are kind of meetings and partnerships that I really enjoy because they really are at the heart of what UNICEF likes to do, is to prepare the children for tomorrow. And if technology and AI can be of help in that, we are ever so grateful for all of you for being here with us. So we are very excited to partner with Development Data Partnerships, who have been with us, and we have been with them for a few years now to work on a pathway by which the children benefit the best from AI and technology, and we also have solid frameworks and policies in place that do no harm. So that's really at the heart of it, of the conversation today. So a warm welcome to all of you, to all our partners, World Bank, the ambassador, deputy ambassador from Spain, who has been one of our champions and leaders in starting with reducing or addressing the problem of digital divide. Now we are not that we have solved that problem, but we are adding reducing the AI divide to that issue, and we are ever so grateful to Spain and the government for your support, and more importantly, championing the children in that problem. So I don't have to tell this to this crowd, but I always feel as UNICEF, as champions for children, we should not feel shy about talking about children, no matter how much of it is a known topic. So I will start with that to say that algorithms that we all know of today already influence what children and adults see online. Maybe children see more online, and with that rise of generative AI, this trend has only intensified. Is it intensifying in a good way? If so, what is it? Is it causing harm in ways that we know that we can prevent, or is it causing harm in ways we don't know how to address and prevent? So that's really at the heart of it. We have some little bit of research. What would be an event by this division if you don't quote a few data points? So the research by UNICEF and UNESCO in Argentina in particular, for example, shows that children between 9 to 11 use Gen AI mostly to search for more information for homework. That's good. I hope. And the parents always worry, so are you learning from it, right? So in Japan, half of teens want to use AI for emotional support. Another dimension of completely in another different part of the world. In the US, 39% of 5 to 8-year-old use apps with AI to learn about school-related materials. So you see this big age group and age range and how multiple uses they are in different parts of the world. So there is no one age group that is using AI more or less, or no one age group that is using AI for the same reasons. So these are just 3 examples that really illustrate the width and the depth of what AI is being currently used for. We all think that AI is yet to come, but it's here. It's been here with us for many years, and now it's penetrated, or it is part of all our daily life. It's transforming, especially the world of data, from analytics to dissemination. The analytics almost seems to happen magically somewhere behind the scenes, and we are here to make sure that analytics to dissemination is a safe path, it's a good path. So from data cleaning to data generation. And however, these beneficial technologies also risk deepening the inequalities and leaving the most vulnerable behind, especially children. And the vulnerability of the children, not just as children as an age group, but where they are, what is their exposure, their opportunities, and all of those nuances and details that matter the most. Therefore, we must safeguard the policy, the privacy, while we also drive the AI equity. We recognize the AI's potential to transform society, and we're already seeing examples of that. We acknowledge the profound challenges ahead, of course, and really help and want the help of the governments and international organizations who are here with us today to really help us, to kind of get out of those that we are struggling to fully leverage these technologies. There are many reasons, but I want to quote 3 important ones that are very particular that need urgent action. One is there is still a limited data talent, believe it or not. Underdeveloped technology infrastructures, believe it or not. Lack of access to many novel data sources. So things that we think we take for granted should be there, and therefore AI is just going to make our lives better. These are just 3 areas where AI can only be useful and helpful if we also address that. No AI without data, no data without AI, right? So, and no data without technology, no technology without data. So I think these are dyads that were conceptually unclear, but now it's very clear how they conceptually hang together. So AI practitioners, we are observing, but we want your help to reduce that divide, that the AI practitioners remain disconnected from the reality of the humanitarian and the development world. And lack of that knowledge and context and meaningful challenges to participate in, understand development in humanitarian sector needs is a reality we want to come out of. If we do not act with urgency and clarity and being purposeful for the impact that we want to create, we may end up deepening that AI divide and the digital divide that's going to leave more children behind, because those who have access and the opportunities are going to run much faster, and those who are left behind are going to be further left behind. And bridging that divide is not simply a matter of making more connectivity, but it's also a matter of underlying a principle-based approach to laws and policies, and also strengthening the infrastructure. So once again, our sincere thanks to the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation, for your long-standing partnership, and to all the other partners that we have today, that with your support, that we can strengthen both the partnerships, the capacity, and the capability. So to conclude, I would say that I would propose a 4-point agenda for us today. Like, let us emphasize the importance of putting children at the center of AI system design and development, not an afterthought, which Tanya is a champion of, and she will tell you that. Identify the biggest gaps preventing the AI systems from working for children, especially the most vulnerable. It may sound straightforward, but if you don't put your mind to it and do it systematically, you may not always know this is the gap that needs to get filled. Advanced policy debates, not superficial ones, but really well-researched and well thought out policy debates and operational solutions. I've been in many AI platforms, and even the ones that that are complementing the digital compact. It was surprising how clear the digital conversations were. Somewhat AI conversations were less clear, but okay. But placing children in both of those, opaque. Right? And almost we had to keep but children, so there is still a problem, right? So when we know that this technology is for the children and for the future of children, why is it so difficult to put that in the heart of the debate and the center of designs? I really appeal to all of you to work with us to help overcome these and make sure that the policy debates are advanced and provide operational solutions. And of course, we cannot do this alone. Multi-stakeholder partnerships are important, and innovation at the heart of it is really essential to building this ethical and purposeful AI. So thank you very much, and welcome to UNICEF House, and we really look forward to your deliberations and your guidance as we move ahead together. Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming today.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much, Vidhya. So my name is Tanya Okoni. I'm Senior Advisor on Innovation, where I'm based here in New York, looking at strategy, stakeholders, and emerging technology, not only digital, but beyond, and actually in a world today where AI is accelerating and has influence on all sorts of technologies, whether they are emerging or not. Delighted to be with you because there's so much that we need to discuss. Now, many of the sessions on AI in the past and this week will talk a lot and dwell a lot on policy, on guidance, and on governance. But what we promised you all was to get down and dirty and talk about partnerships. What does partnerships look like for AI in this new world? What happens, as Vidhya said, when you have a gap between practitioners and what is happening on the ground? Huge opportunities to make advances, but also risks of those gaps, creating bigger divides. And we have a fantastic panel. The objective for the next 90 minutes is to have a fantastic and fascinating conversation, and it's one that is going to open up to all of you. So please keep those questions. There is a design to this that opens up that chance for you to be part of this conversation too. But who are we having the conversation with? Gives me a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Medis Nene, who's the Senior Advisor on AI and Digital Transformation at the United Nations Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies. He leads the design and implementation of technical programs on AI for development, digital public infrastructure, and open source. And so I guess you've been busy this week, right, Medi? I'm sure many people here have been at and will still be at various sessions for the Open Source Week. Your work is, a lot on aligning digital technologies, including AI, with global development goals and on scalable rights-based digital systems. So welcome, Medi. I know this is going to be fascinating to have your perspective from that global UN position. Next, we have Dr. Mira Vozer, who is a leading expert on emerging technologies and responsible innovation. Her background is that of a data scientist and quantitative strategist, which is a fascinating phrase in and of itself. She assists organizations, including UNICEF, with implementing actionable, responsible AI systems, along with risk management frameworks. And we're looking forward this evening to her perspectives on how children's needs can be embedded into AI systems from the start, just as Vidhya had introduced us to remind us they're not last, but children should be first. Next, we have Ana Jimenez de la Hoz, who is the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Government of Spain to the United Nations. Ana is a career diplomat from Spain with extensive experience in the United Nations and has been serving here in New York since 2022. She, as Vidhya had recognized, represents a very valued partner to the UN community and to UNICEF in particular, because the government of Spain supports the joint ITU-UNICEF connectivity initiative to connect every school in the world called GIGA. She is also, the government of Spain also is a co-host and sponsor of the Frontier Data Network, which is the host of this evening's event. And of course, our own Digital Impact Division is hosted in Valencia. So lots of roots connect us to Spain, and very welcome to you, Ana. Catherine MacDonald is next, and she brings invaluable private sector expertise, particularly on the element of strategic partnerships. So we're really looking forward to learning from her insights and experience. She is the Senior Director for Good at UCLA, which, if you don't know, is a global leader in mobile and broadband network intelligence, testing applications, and technology. And in the area of strategic partnerships, she's worked a lot with governments and other industry engagements, and for example, on how private sector data can drive humanitarian outcomes. So welcome, Kathy. And finally, but never lastly and least, is Dr. Stefan Verhulst. He's the co-founder and chief of R&D at the New York University's GovLab. He's a global leader in civic tech innovation and open governance with a focus on digital public goods. And he works on redesigning AI and data governance models to advance public interest. Stefan brings a systems thinking perspective to building scalable and ethical AI for social good. And he's a strong advocate for really practical things that practitioners and partners should care deeply about. Things like communities of practice, co-creation, co-design, and really has a range of research initiatives in the GovLab that I think we can learn a few snippets from that would be incredibly valuable this evening. So welcome, Stefan. So let's start hearing from each of you, please, on the sort of the big question, which is, we talked about children first in AI and designing with children in mind. But really, what does child-centered AI practically mean? How might we define it? How would we recognize it when we saw it? Is child-centered AI the same as responsible AI for children? I know you all bring a different perspective and a different facet, which is why it's going to be so interesting to hear about this. But maybe we can just go down the line and start with you, Mehdi.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all the audience for participating in this panel. Thank you for the invitation. And so AI-centric or child-centric AI and responsible AI for children. Let's situate the AI, and then we can situate the environment around the AI. I think AI is a tool, and it should be and stay as a tool. So the AI is not the goal. The AI is the mean towards a goal. So that's at the end, we would like to improve the condition of learning, the condition of living, development for kids or for children, providing a better environment, better mastering the climate change issues. So the AI is the tool that is taking us towards that goal. So it's not by definition the finality or the goal, ultimate goal. Again, it's a tool. So let's pick any kind of tool, a hammer, depending on what you want to do with it. Depending on, you can harm someone with it, or you can build a house with it. And like any other tool, if we stay at this analogy, not every tool can be put in the hands of a child. So we need to be very cautious. There is a training, there is awareness of the risks and the opportunities regarding that tool. And that's where and there is a lot of intuition on when bringing these tools to the children. So I think from that perspective of AI as tool, we have a lot to learn from what we already have done with the digital transformation, with the tools, with the internet, with the social media, and a lot of our failures, meaning that we need to learn from these failures to understand that beyond all the safeguards that we've put and responsible usage of social media, for example, or responsible usage of internet, parental guidance through the usage of internet, we failed. So with the AI, the tool is much bigger, much powerful. So we have to be much more careful. I don't think that we have the chance to fail like what we have done with the social media, letting the proliferation of fake news, misinformation, disinformation. And then if we take it from the health perspective, through the COVID and post-COVID, we have saw a decrease in the term of vaccination. But if we talk to the kids, or if we talk to the children today, 12 to 50 years, and we ask them about if there is a new pandemic, are you ready to get vaccinated? They'd say no. And that's simply from, I'll stop there. That's simply from digital assets. So that's a lesson from which I think we should learn before going even to the AI.
All right, so learn from our failures. And by the way, our panelists do not need to agree with each other, just flagging that. If you have a different opinion, we would value that. But Merab, let me ask you, because the same sort of question, how do you sort of see putting children at the center of AI?
Okay. Oh, it's working. Technology. Okay, so I probably will take it more to the technology aspect of it, even though I'm also understanding all the needs, the actual needs, etc. So, yes, I'm very much into innovation and emerging technologies. I love technology, don't get me wrong, but it has to be deployed, developed, thought from the outset responsibly. And it is possible. So when someone is saying, no, it's not possible, it's going to hinder innovation, if we think too much about responsible innovation, this is not true. Because it's something that can be thought through the entire process of the development of any any tool that, as it was mentioned here. And the tools should be not, so there are two things. One is that, yes, we have to educate them to use it responsibly. So that's one aspect that we're going to put aside. But there's also a responsibility and accountability from the developer or the company that developed it to develop it responsibly. And those guardrails and all this process of responsibility, which I also, trying to help organizations implement that whenever they develop anything, is to think like from the entire life cycle, from even, just when you have the inception of think about the idea, already think about what the possible risk that can come out from the usage of this tool, so to speak, and also what risk can happen through the process of development. So this is something that have to be thought from the outset and throughout.
Here. Now, Ana, I want to turn to you because I think the government of Spain has weighed both risks and opportunities. And very much in line with the kind of how do we make sure that infrastructure, technology, etc., doesn't have divides that are accelerated by this. I think the government has really been a shining example of ways of investing in and thinking around closing that divide because of the potential upside opportunities from this. So maybe you could share a little bit on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thanks very much for inviting Spain to this very important event. Artificial intelligence is really a priority for us, national and also in the context of the United Nations. As you may know, we are also co-facilitating an intergovernmental process to build on the Global Digital Compact and establish a global dialogue and an independent scientific panel. So this is really central for us. So the first thing that I would like to say in response to your question is that for us, AI has to have a very human rights-centered approach. And this is also the approach that the European Union has taken. And the European Union has also been pioneer in passing a very comprehensive normative framework through the Artificial Intelligence Act that was actually passed during our Spain's latest presidency of the European Union in the second semester of 2023. So we really think that having this very strong human rights-centered normative frameworks is very useful, precisely building on what you were saying. So from the get-go, we have these sort of safeguards for whatever tools that you mentioned we are building on. And in terms of challenges and opportunities, so one of the challenges, for instance, that we find is the speed at which all these developments take place, both from a quantitative and a qualitative point of view. And also the contrast between the different contexts in the world, what's happening in some countries, what's happening in others, and how this affects, obviously, children in all these different contexts. The second challenge is how systems can be ready to respond to the new technology landscape. So we find that obviously in contexts where there's low connectivity, there's low levels of literacy, multilingual settings, how we can make sure that systems are strengthened, that capacity building is there, so actually the connectivity happens and then the AI can be developed. And that's also why Spain is hosting in Barcelona this Giga Center, which is a joint ITU UNICEF project to ensure that every single school in the world is connected to the internet. And the third point that I would like to make has to do with partnerships. So for us, governments, and I think for everyone in this panel, it's very important to strengthen partnerships between governments, private sector, academia, and really to look for all the talent that is everywhere. For instance, as I mentioned, when we were developing this intergovernmental government, of course, first we were approached by universities, in developed countries, this big private sector, but then we really made an effort to identify, and there's amazing talent, amazing institutions in other parts of the world. So how we can tap into all this potential to make progress. Thank you.
Thank you. And that, I think, is really a fundamental piece that we'd love to sort of dwell on and maybe hear as we move to Kathy on partnerships, and Stefan, thinking about academia and designing the whole capacity building thing and the whole question around capacity and fluency in AI is super important from a practitioner standpoint as well. But Kathy, partners in particular, and your experience, what could you share in terms of your wisdom around child-centered responsible AI?
Thank you. I'd say from our perspective, UCLA is really focused on the networks and connectivity. So we're not so focused on the children because we're not really interested in the genders, age, any of those aspects. But that's where, turn it off, sorry. But that's where the partnerships become key, because through our partners, we can work together and they have other metrics, data, understandings that we're not necessarily aware of. So therefore, our data and our understanding of the networks and the connectivity that's needed to support AI can then be one metric among many that can give a broader view into what's needed to support AI and to support the children, the schools, the education. If there's not a strong enough network there, connectivity network, then it's useless. They can't access the tool that is AI. So that is really one of our focus, and especially when it comes to building partnerships, getting an understanding of what others are trying to do, seeing how what we know can be supportive of it, and create an atmosphere where we will together do more than what we could alone.
Thank you, Stefan.
I can figure this out. Yes, thanks for the question and thanks for having me. I will try to deconstruct it a little bit, because child-centric AI, responsible AI, is kind of a big topic. And from my point of view, you cannot, as Vidhya said, you cannot have AI without reusing data that was collected for one purpose for then subsequently training or using it for RAG models for AI. And so from my point of view, what does child-centric AI and responsible AI mean? Means that the data is being reused for AI in alignment with children's expectations and preferences on how that data is subsequently used to train AI. Now, the question then is, of course, how do we then establish preferences and expectations from children and youth in order to know how they want their data to be reused for training of AI? And here, what we have been working on is kind of trying to innovate. First of all, how do you establish preferences and expectations from children and youth around data reuse? And that requires a new way of actually engaging with them, because it's not a binary discussion. It's not, yes, I want my data to be reused, or no, I want my data not to be reused. Typically, if you would ask them, it would be, well, it depends. So we need to actually have a way to really engage with youth on what do you mean it depends. And that's what we've been trying to do together with, for instance, UNICEF, but also with the Lancet Commission recently around how can data be reused for AI purposes to support mental health, for instance. And so there we developed youth solutions labs, where we actually spent a lot of time introducing concepts that they need to know in order to have a sophisticated debate about data reuse. The second aspect is then, how do you then take those preferences and expectations and turn that into something that can be enforced, both at the level of policy making, but also at the level of technological design. And here we've been working on this concept of a social license, right? Making sure that data reuse aligns with actually the expectations and preferences of youth through a social license. And that's kind of a way that we need to start thinking more about how do we actually, if we start reusing data, including data from the private sector, how do we make sure that that has a social license that aligns with expectations and preferences of children? And then the third element is, of course, how do you enforce that? How do you actually then make sure that this gets implemented? And here we've been looking in the creation of data commons, where actually data is made accessible in alignment with preferences and expectations of youth in the context of a data commons for AI training and so on. And so that's kind of one way to start thinking about child-centric AI, because typically we get confused about what element of the AI lifecycle do you want to make child-centric. And from my point of view, the leverage to actually influence AI is at the input stage. Once it's at the output stage, it's kind of too late. And so that's where, from my point of view, you actually really need to start thinking about how do we make sure that whatever goes in AI aligns with preferences and expectations from children. And that's, from my point of view, how we go about child-centric AI.
Excellent. And I think we would love to hear a bit more, because you mentioned life cycle, Mirav, as well, and I think you might have some other thoughts. If we could just pass one of the microphones back up here. And Stefan, I'd love to, and for the rest of the panel, to think a little bit about, it's a sophisticated discussion, not only for young people, but for practitioners as well in humanitarian and development sectors. So what else can we do to better equip our practitioners around the world to be more effective in understanding and having those kind of conversations? But Mirav, please.
To continue the thought of Stefan, but take it to the next level. So it's too much. Is it better? Okay, sorry. Okay. I think that Stefan mentioned a lot of things. I mean, at least, that's what I kind of gathered, is like the use of data, preferences, control, I think also. Because, I always think about the integration of technologies and how technologies can complement each other, because every technology has strengths and weaknesses, and we all know that. AI is not perfect. Blockchain is not perfect. Quantum computing is nothing is perfect, but they do complement each other if you think about a holistic solution, a comprehensive solution. So one thought that I had while Stefan was talking is about the usage of blockchain technology, because this is what it's all about. The owner of the data has retained control over the data, and the owner of the data can decide how to use it and who to use it with. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect why I like the idea of blockchain technology in the integration of developing an AI model is that also, remember, you also mentioned data in, data out. So in order for the data to go out, you have all kinds of algorithms, so to speak, and training of the data and everything else, and testing that eventually, will go out and how the model will perform. So all of this information, so to speak, is going to be recorded on the blockchain and traced and audited, and it's all transparent, so you know exactly who's been working on the model, how they've been working on the model, what data was injected, so to speak, into the model, how it was trained, how it was handled, let's say its biases or whatever else, and how did you put any controls or guardrails if that's, or preferences. So yes, policies is nice, but it has to be actionable. And the way to put it in action is using something like blockchain technology. And it has been done already. There are some use cases that has happened with several companies, not organizations like UNICEF, but organizations in the private sector. So this idea that you're mentioning, it's doable in my mind.
And
You just have to think about it more.
Yeah, let me give it
more
back to
holistically.
Stefan, because I think I'd love to know a little bit more, and Mehdi, I'm going to come back to you, thinking about how you connect across the UN-wide, but around building these capacities around, I mean, I love what you said about making things really practicable, because if policies and governance is unenforceable and untraceable, then it's kind of aspirational and not much more help. I mean, in the same way, Anna, as you were sort of really building out that positive future, practically building it out one school at a time, those young people don't get a chance of even coming close to any kind of technology, let alone AI, if they are not connected at all. But Stefan, back to you, and then Mehdi, and then Kathy, I'm going to be asking you a question around perhaps how you think the private sector can play a role in building out capacity and partnering in many other ways around some of these things that we've been hearing different panel members speak on. So, Stefan.
Yeah, and again, I mean, capacity is a big, again, another big term. What are we talking about? But from my point of view, staying on the topic that you cannot have AI without data, I think one of the missing capacities in the current environment is actually stewardship of data. And I think too much has been focused on data protection, which is very important. And there is, anyway, clear capacity nowadays around data protection policies. Quite often, the other capacity was then data science, which was then all, if you have data, how do you actually make sense of it? But the missing part is actually, how do you actually steward data in ways that then can be reused for other purposes in alignment with actually preferences and expectations. And that stewardship role turns out to be not straightforward. You actually need to really have sophistication and understanding what are possible use cases, and even start thinking creatively what are use cases that are currently not solved, but then also start to think about how do I prepare the data in ways that actually can serve particular kind of use cases in alignment with preferences and expectations. And I think that's a capacity that is currently underexplored. There's quite often even no function, except I think UNICEF has data stewardship functions, but quite often no function within the organization that is a clear data stewardship function. And that's, I would say, holds back both access to data, but it also holds back the responsible reuse of data for then purposes that might be beneficial. And I think that's what we've been focusing on. Because anyway, in the whole ecosystem of data, I think there's a lot of attention on data science, now a lot of attention on model development, but ultimately without kind of that data stewardship function, it's going to be very hard to connect as a translator between the purpose and the data and the application, but also to do it in a responsible way.
You mentioned two things that are particularly interesting. I mean, just remind us all, one of the use cases that is now top of the list in terms of users is around mental health. So people are turning a lot to AI for their mental health and to kind of get advice. Also, just broad questions, what should I do with my life? And we let the algorithm, we deliver some trust in that sort of interaction. So these are really fundamental components that are affecting individuals in a very fundamental way. So applying exactly what you've all said to something like that, where someone could be under 18, is exceptionally important. And I also want to highlight the piece that you were talking around use cases, because we know from the private sector that is one of the biggest challenges. Lots of power, lots of technology, just not quite sure what is the real return on investment best use cases. And in our case, in terms of, I love what you were sort of talking about, a social license, it's not just a return on investment in terms of money, time, and processing power, but a big chunk of that is, what does it mean to a child? What does this mean to a young person? What are they being able to access through something like gigas, connectivity? Are they able to interact and understand, the management of their data, etc. But I promised, so please, you see, across the whole of the UN and provide guidance, and connection across the UN in terms of AI. How do you sort of see some of these points kind of connecting? Are there elements around capacity that you see where we have gaps or opportunities for?
Thank you so much.
We voted the GDC last year, the Global Digital Compact, thanks to our Spain colleague who are leading on a part of the GDC implementation regarding the AI. There is also a strong implementation regarding the data. There's the voted the working group on data governance that is currently starting their work in Geneva with our colleagues at the UNCTAD, trying to build this vision of comprehensive vision and holistic approach to the AI governance with the lens and within the lens of AI, and then joining Stefan on his thinking, moving from common data to data commons, where we have a kind of very vast area of data harvesting, where we collect whatever we want, as we have seen during the first wave of the AI, and producing whatever we want without guardrails. Within the UN, the work on data governance and data commons is being taken very seriously because there is a shift in the mentality and the vision regarding the data from a simple set of information to an entire ecosystem. So data is no longer coming alone as a simple asset. It's coming with a lot of in and out outcome. We have seen that there is during the COVID there was a big a discussion regarding the sharing of the outcome of the data being shared by member states to build the vaccine. And then we saw that at the end of this sharing process of the data, the governance was not able to activate the sharing of the vaccine. So we end up with sharing the data without sharing the outcome. I think we linked all these pieces together within the UN vision from early start of data production to the finalization of the data outcome. And we look at it as a whole ecosystem. When it comes to children and mental health, and I've been working in that space, for example, if we look at it from a perspective of governance, there is a lot of issues. It's not only about how to govern and how to reinforce the policy regarding these data and the entire value chain of the data, but also about the intention and sometimes even the misuse of the data, especially when it comes to the children and mental health and all the implications that may have on them, especially when it comes transferred to the AI. Just to say very quickly an example, Replica was an example of mental health application based on AI and data gathered from adolescents across Europe to provide mental support to the children and adolescents in Europe, especially for those who are under severe depression or isolated. It was not complied with the rules of data usage in the European Union, so the service was cut. And then we saw that when the service was cut, many children and adolescents start thinking and asking for the service to come back, but also treating by committing suicide if the service is not coming back. The intention of the service was to bring some concrete solution to the depressed adolescent. We end up by reinforcing the depression. So always this value chain should be carefully managed and should be, as Stefan was saying, the stewardship should never end.
And I really appreciate that you are living by your own words and giving us an example of learning from failure, because that is something that you started off saying, was really important. So thank you for that concrete example. Kathy, I wanted to ask you, what we're hearing here is not only perspectives, but I think now a number of people have talked about the interconnection between data flows, who collects it, who reuses it, etc. This ecosystem of AI and data really is a partnership one. It's one that no stakeholder alone can, lord over. I think your work in strategic partnerships has really seen what partnerships, particularly from the private sector, can bring and how this can kind of bridge across many different stakeholders. So hopefully you could share a little bit, about that. And then Anna, I'd love to get some perspective from you as well in terms of those different stakeholders, different partnerships next. Kathy.
Absolutely. So from my perspective, at Ookla as a private company, we spend a lot of time in our own little world looking at the networks, looking at connectivity, understanding what's happening where. Is the experience good enough? Is the service good enough? Is there infrastructure? Can you use it? However, we don't really see outside of that. That's where the partnerships become really important. And understanding what the partner, potential partner, hopefully will become a partner, is looking to do, sort of, from our world, scoping it out, making sure that everyone understands what we're trying to do, what they're trying to do, and then working together to really, we understand the network. And so AI can't live without the network. So we can take a look and see oftentimes if this area has enough infrastructure from the network perspective so that it can maybe support AI in the future, the data centers that are required, and what children are in the area that may be able to benefit from this. We're not going to see the children, but that's where a partner comes in. We can say there's low enough latency, it looks like it's reliable internet, it's stable, it has a strong enough download or upload, there's other metrics as well. Those are all important when it comes to AI. And then when we've worked with some partners that are focused on educational arenas, where schools are, where libraries are, where are areas where children may be accessing the internet in any way, including AI. And then can the network support that? And if in many cases, there's whole countries and territories that it cannot support that. And why is that? So maybe looking beyond it to see, is there some sort of government initiative that needs to take place? We work with a lot of governments. We work with a lot of network providers. Those network providers, oftentimes on our commercial side of the business, they're looking to improve the networks, and we're giving them the data and the areas to understand why it should or how it should be improved to impact a particular community. And then from the UCLA for Good perspective, working with groups through the Development Data Partnership, World Bank, IMF, many others, if we can scope out and understand what they're trying to do, we're often very happy to try to give them the data and understanding of an area that they need to be able to, provide results that have impact, that can make policy changes, that can further improve the infrastructure so that AI can exist. And hopefully that will be the case.
Thank you. Anna.
Thank you very much. So my first point about partnerships is the importance of the United Nations itself. So that's why we are partnering with UNICEF. We are really a government who believes in multilateralism, and at a time where the UN has been questioned, when there are issues about its role in the world, we think that this particular field is an amazing opportunity to show that the UN is relevant, that partnerships are important, and that we can really make a difference on the ground. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all want to do as governments, as every sector of the society, is to ensure that no one is left behind, obviously including children who are the hope for the future. So that has been key for us as Spain, and that's why we think that also by attracting all the talent that we are bringing to our country itself, in Valencia, in Barcelona, and maybe elsewhere, we can also build this hub of excellence in which there can be like cross-fertilization between, all the different talented people who will be working there. And that offers a great potential for growth and for change and transformation in the world.
And I love the optimism and constructivism that you have just positioned this conversation into. I'm flagging up that it is now time also for us to be able to take questions from the floor. So please do, flag your hand, and I think we may have a roving mic that we can get to you. So please do indicate that, but and if not, I have loads more questions to ask. And Mirav, I can see that you have something that you want to add to this, so please go ahead. Stefan, I'd also want to come back and ask you a question, because when Mehdi spoke about hammers and tools, and I started to feel very guilty because I'm a mom who bought her 8-year-old son a jigsaw. So not only was it like, a hammer, but it was actually a sort of somewhat dangerous electrical tool. But I think there's something around guardrails, for frameworks for freedom, risk mitigation, and Stefan, how we can co-design with young people. So not only protect them from different real risks, but how do we, practically as practitioners bring them into that design process? So I know, Mira, this is something you think about as well. So perhaps if we can have your intervention and then Stefan.
Thank you. Okay. I know that many use cases have been mentioned here many times, which is true. I mean, that's what this is what I'm saying, that we have to think from the outset, because you're not just building something to build something, you're building for a purpose. The purpose is what are you going to do with it? So there have been talks here about education and also health. It's all great. So usually what people do is, like, when they think about the use case, they think about how it's going to benefit. But I think they're missing how it can also harm and what are the risks from the input and the output. So I'll give you an example. I mean, like Mehdi just mentioned an example. There was a research paper. I mean, we all say, we need AI can help with education. I agree, and they also mentioned here that this is what they use it for, and there are all kinds of use cases like that. However, it all depends how it is developed and how it is applied. So let me explain to you. There was a research that I forgot exactly whose university, I don't know if it's MIT or Stanford, one of them, and a very recent from late 24. So they took two groups of students. One group, they introduced it to ChatGPT, and they said you can use it for education, for your school or whatever. The other group, they didn't have any access. So yeah, after they did that, yes, the ones that did have access to ChatGPT, they performed a bit better. Not tremendously better, but there was a slight better. Now they took it out. So those who didn't have ChatGPT don't have it, and those who never had it don't have it. And then they checked again, and what happened was very interesting. The group that used ChatGPT, the performance dropped. And the group that never had access, they continued to perform the same, and if not better. So that's the idea. Okay, we want that to help in education, and it can, but we also don't want them to undermine their learning skills. So there is a way to do that. I mean, you can implement within the development of that tool of education, you can implement like the Socratic model, which means that it just doesn't spit out the answer. It works with you like a tutor. So it's kind of walk you through the answer. So you still keep, the learning skills rather than completely like, I'm not thinking anymore. I'll let, this machine give me the answer. So that's the thing that I think.
And I think that's a really nice concrete example of what you were talking about, Mehdi, which is it's just a tool. Technology is agnostic, essentially. It's kind of then what we put around it, in whose hands do we put it in, why, how do we build their capacity, and for the why,
yes.
Stefan.
Yes. So thanks for that. And so yes. So data and AI is only as good as the questions and the purpose we seek to use it for, right? And it turns out that most of the discussions that I've been part of in my kind of life when I focused on data have always been about the data, right? And so it's always about the supply side. But hardly ever are we focusing on how do we actually define the demand, and how do we do this in collaboration with children, for instance? And how do we know whether these are actually the questions worth answering to a large extent? And so a few years ago, I created something called the 100 Questions Initiative, mainly because I was sick and tired of being on panels talking about data, but without actually formulating what is the question you seek to answer. And so I said, well, it's great to have 100 data sets. Would it not be great to also have 100 questions? Now, it turns out that as a society, we are extremely badly organized and extremely unsophisticated when it comes to questioning. And so that's when I started working on what I call a new science of questions, which is really building not only data literacy, but actually questions literacy. I mean, what is actually the questions that matter for a particular kind of problem? And more importantly, how do we do this in a participatory way? Because from my point of view in society, we actually have questions inequities, meaning that many groups in society never get asked what is the question that we should answer with data. Quite often they are never part of actually the conversation about what are the questions that we should prioritize, especially when it comes to children or other marginalized groups. And so we need to really develop, as I said, a new science of questions. We need to invest in questions literacy, not only in data literacy, because the result, the tool, is only going to be as valuable as actually the question or the purpose for which we are seeking to develop. And so that's why, anyway, we are about to release a new initiative which we call the Q Lab, which is kind of building this question science. And now we are working with many organizations. The last one is with the Gates Foundation, where we are looking into what are the 100 questions in women's health, talking about questions in equity, meaning women's health is underdeveloped mainly because the questions that women had were never really prioritized. And so we are trying to develop this kind of change in how we talk about data, not just by focusing on the demand side, which is still important, but especially also focusing on actually what are the questions that should be answered, we have not answered, but we could answer because the data is there, but it has never been prioritized. And I think that's something that we need to take into account as well.
So do I hear you vaguely suggesting it would be great to have 100 questions that children have about artificial intelligence, for example?
For
and,
instance,
you know,
or what are the 100 questions, anyway, that would, if answered, would improve children's well-being, for instance, and then how do we know what data we need, including, for instance, data that indicates connectivity, for instance, if that's a priority question for us.
To answer those questions, we may not need AI necessarily. So you can use the data, but it doesn't necessarily has to be AI. So it's not about how to use AI, but how to answer the question, given the data.
And I love that you introduced that, which is a really fundamental point, because I sometimes sort of, let's put on the practitioner hat around, not necessarily in this building, but here AI used almost like a verb. Can you AI that, or can I AI that, or is that, it's sort of, I have a problem, must be solvable by AI. And in fact, that's not necessarily the case. And here comes the question back to you, which is, one, capacitate children, and young people, give them a role in co-designing and understanding and prioritizing. What about the rest of us who are slightly older and are meant to be, good stewards, good supporters, good cheerleaders, good enablers of the good that AI can deliver? Maybe we're not all up to the task of where we should be. How do we get to ask better questions? How do we build up our capacity? What can we do maybe through partnerships? How can we leverage knowledge and networks, communities of practice across the UN, beyond the UN? Would love to hear, everyone's thoughts on this.
Okay, so, yeah, back to Stefan, 100 questions. This 100 questions, I think every one of us can ask, not just a child. Yes, 5-year-old to, 50 and 80-year-old. It doesn't matter. We all have questions that haven't been answered yet. But they probably will be different. But it doesn't mean that they cannot be answered by data. And we just have to know which data. The data is available, that's for sure. The question is how to utilize it. And we will know how to utilize it if we know what the purpose of that, what we need to answer. So I think it's every one of us will need that 100 questions. So you can, distribute that to everyone. And from that, we can have a better idea of how to utilize this data. And of course, put the right guardrails and et cetera, whether it's for adults or for children. So that's the way that I would look at it.
Thank you. Mehdi?
Yeah, quickly on the usage and good usage of data in AI. It's amazing how we shifted from AI to data and from data to AI again. I think we failed during the digital transformation, the introduction of internet, social media. I mean, it's very clear. We have to admit that. And the principle was, because we've been looking at the positive outcome coming from the introduction of this technology with the children, and the not only, and the adults. And we focused a lot on the opportunities and the adventure of this technology. And today, this is also, we are redoing the same approach. When it comes to children, at least, I think rather than going to the responsible AI, which is a very large scope, we should look at the irresponsible AI. What should we not do? What should we avoid putting in the hands of kids? We've been talking about the ability to learn, critical thinking, augmenting their cognitive capacity by mathematical and logical thinking, all these things that we know we should keep. So we know what we have to keep. So we can define better what we should avoid. And then building this irresponsible AI vision, it's not about a risk-oriented approach. It's much more about opportunity, because we will give them a much larger landscape where they are free to grow, where they are free to use the AI, while limiting the access to the irresponsible AI, the portion that they should not, or at least gradually, not go in till they get equipped to the next gradual phase of cognitive capabilities or learning process, so they can get access to the next phase. So the vision of risks vs opportunity is not always in opposition. When we define the risk, we limit the area of the risk and we give the rest as the big opportunity. And I think we cannot limit the opportunities, we can only limit the risk. And that's maybe how we should proceed in order to be able to define what is this irresponsible AI.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if you would like to add anything here too. I mean, as you were talking about the risk and opportunity, I like the focus on the kind of the opportunities for sure. And it did make me wonder though, does AI and teenagers have anything in common? In other words, if you tell them they can't go there, that's certainly where they're going, and they will find many ingenious ways of getting around it, both from a agentic perspective, but otherwise. Anna.
So from the point of view of the government, we think there are great opportunities in this field, and very much agree with the points that were made before. We think there's a great potential in everything we do right now on AI, potential for collaboration among governments, potential for partnerships with the Global South, potential for capacity building. And we also think that once we have the independent scientific panel and the global dialogue, there will be also amazing opportunities to strengthen the dialogue on AI governance, to have a panel up and going which can provide research and advice on where the AI field is going. So there's obviously a lot we can do. And again, I think this is a call for the UN system to get their act together and to be able to respond to the challenges, but also the amazing opportunities that we have before us.
I mean, thank you. And I think the two things that came to mind from what you just mentioned, one of which is that whole role and really maybe valued expert access to expert opinion for governments, especially in the Global South, around the idea of the Scientific Advisory Board, which the Secretary General has put together, but particularly around AI. I mean, evolving so quickly and with many similar challenges and constraints, but also similar opportunities to be unlocked. I think really a very good point. I'm going to ask Kathy, but Kathy, I warn you, Stefan is nodding madly to your left. So,
I just want to follow up on the issue of scientific board as well. I'm always surprised that discussions about data are quite often the least data-driven. and so what we need to build is more evidence, to be quite honest, on what are the risks and harms And we need to do it rapidly, because I totally agree is that we failed with social media, mainly because we didn't really invest in actually understanding what are some of the impacts, and we still, by the way, struggle with, with understanding what are the impacts of social media. So if there's one thing that the research and data within UNICEF can also contribute to, is actually really evidence about what is the impact of AI on children, realizing, of course, anyway, we put children here now in one basket, but anyway, there are different age groups, different demographics, different use cases, and we need to become far more sophisticated than that. I mean, in my former life, I was asked by the European Commission to help draft the parental control guidelines within Europe, and so I actually did a lit review of what is known about the impact of in that time it was television. Can you imagine? Of television, and specifically particular kind of content, of course, on children. And frankly, the evidence was conflicting. There was not, anyway, any kind of evidence that could say, well, it's very bad or it's not bad. The only thing that was supported was the fact that it depends on how much consumption of television there is, and there will be an impact. The same thing we need, anyway, we need better with regards to AI, and I would say we need to actually really invest in research, independent evidence, ideally not supported, anyway, I have nothing against industry, but not supported by industry, for instance, to really understand what is the impact, so that we can have next time a more evidence-based discussion about what is it that we need to prevent, and what is it that we need to stimulate as well.
I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned data, and Kathy, I think this is probably an aspect where actually the private sector has an outsized, valuable role to play. Not only that, but when we talk about the global south, so much data is a blank. You cannot fill it with synthetic data. There's nothing to really work from. You mentioned earlier, Anna, languages as well. Much of the content in those languages isn't captured, isn't understood, isn't used. So we really have a blank, but algorithms are suggesting things for a global population, and most of that global population is completely unrepresented, not even underrepresented. That is a real challenge, but the private sector, including from social media, has tons of data, which may or may not have had the appropriate kind of guardrails around it. I mean, I know that you've been involved in how unlocking private sector data can really have real life-impacting, life-saving humanitarian value. What are other ways, that you sort of see the private sector playing a really critical role in what we've just been talking through?
Well, I mean, that is a great point. There are plenty of areas that just don't have as much data as other areas do. We are mostly a crowdsourced company, Ookla, speed test, down detector. We have people, basically they're using our software, our applications on the ground. They're letting us know what's happening there. However, that requires a crowd. That requires people. Data can be dirty as well. As it's coming in, crowdsourced data can be all over the place. But at the same time, it is better to have that to some degree than nothing at all, which is also the case in some areas, and we strive to fill those gaps and try to make sure that we can find opportunities to see where we can connect more people and get a better understanding of what those people are experiencing on the networks, and what then may be able to support future technologies or not, and what can governments or policymakers then, based on the data that we are providing, the insights we are providing, are able to see opportunities for improvements that can connect communities that weren't connected before. Another, to go back to, it's a different take on questions, but from my perspective, when I'm building partnerships, I want to ask a lot of questions. I want the potential partner to ask me a lot of questions. The more you can scope out ahead of time and understand really what the expectations are, what are the goals, what is the results, what are the results, hopefully, the better partnership you have. I work really oftentimes from the point of, I want to be kind, I want to be supportive, I also want to be as transparent as possible, and I hope my partner is as well. And then together we can really define, hopefully through all the questions, find where the roadblocks may be ahead of time, or as much as we can, and keep in contact. And so with this, with the gathering of data, we have a lot of data. And giving all that data to a partner, without having all the questions or as many items aligned ahead of time. Sometimes it can overwhelm the partner and it actually bogs down the whole project. Their whole initiative can bog down because of that. Or maybe we didn't give them the right things. And the more I learn from what those needs are, then I can hopefully apply it to a similar use case in the future, move more efficiently, move quicker, and then hopefully get more kids connected, more children connected on a quicker basis the next time around, and use those learnings to just move forward.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask, because we bring this to a close, for everyone on the panel to have an opportunity to provide kind of a one-sentence suggestion about what is the one next practical step that we could take, either in the area of sort of supporting our practitioners or strengthening our partnerships in this space. And while I give you just a few minutes a few moments to think about that, I did want to posit a thought, which is, I don't think that we saw this much engagement, concern, sophisticated and nuanced conversation when social media was speeding ahead, as we are seeing now with AI. Certainly AI is, in terms of an exponential growth curve, much faster. However, I think the global village that all of you and all of us in this room represent is also moving faster. And so I think my takeaway from all the perspectives here is, I think if we've got this much commitment, interest, discussion, and nuanced thinking around this and around trying to strengthen not only children, practitioners, partners, experts, and really bringing this kind of community together, I think we have a very good chance of not reliving absolutely the mistakes that were made in the past. But let me ask you all, starting with you, Mirav, what's the one practical thing we can walk away with and do, I don't know, tomorrow, next week?
It's larger than that. I think that we have to do it right, and we have to do it right from once, meaning that's the point. There is no rollback with the AI. Once your data is in, your data is there. So better, meaning while we have some possibility of deleting our data in social media or in digital, with AI, it's not possible. So better to do it right from the beginning.
Okay, so if I may, piggyback on what was said before with the research that you've done with the television. In fact, there is research about the impact of social media. I mean, there is. I mean, it has been done, and especially with adolescents, like 14 to 11 to 14 or something like that. And there are statistics that shows that if they engage more than 3 hours, above 3 hours, then there is some mental issues and depression, etc. So we know that. And not to mention that we also know that social media does implement AI. It's all algorithm. It's not coming from nothing. I mean, the AI is there. It's just getting more sophisticated, and now they want to add bots, that you're more human-like, and Zuckerberg is saying that each and every bot will be like a friend. Okay, but it's there. The AI is there, and we know that it has some harm, and we know that there is statistics, there are research about that, and therefore, to everyone, to Manny's point, that yes, we have to think about. We already know the damage. We already know that this algorithm can do harm. So now when we're taking it to the next step, before we do anything, and by the way, data, even in social media, when you eat, you try to delete it, it's never deleted. I mean, it's there and it can be retrieved somewhere. So nothing is deleted. So,
yes, it's one thing. So I think for me there would be basically 3 words. The first is trust. So we need a trustworthy, human rights-based artificial intelligence, which will be, for the benefit of everyone. The second one is capacity. So through capacity, we can really reach everyone in the world. We can ensure also that communities at the local level benefit from new technologies and all the progress that is taking place. And the third is an issue that we've all raised up in this conversation, is the question of partnerships. And I think we all have a responsibility in our own areas of work to really build strong partnerships to ensure, again, that no one is left behind.
You said a couple things I was going to say. So yes, building that trust so that we can build stronger partnerships, because nothing can live in a silo, and everyone has their own skill sets, and where the strengths are to then work with others who have their strengths and be as open and transparent as possible to work together for the future good.
Great. Well, I feel like I've bombarded people already with things to do, but so if you give me the floor for one more, I would say go back to specify first principles again. Because if this is a fast-moving environment, quite often we feel like we are lost, we don't know how to evaluate, but we actually do have principles that we need to restate. Anna mentioned human rights. I think the first thing that we need to do in a practical manner is that these are the benchmark, these are the principles that we will use to evaluate how to design and how to evaluate AI moving forward. And I think quite often we forget that we either had them or we forget that we need to restate them. And I would argue, anyway, restate the principles. Maybe we do some work with UNICEF about responsible data for children, which is basically a set of principles. But I think that's going to be very important as your North Star to then be able to evaluate whether you're actually going into the right direction.
Thank you very much. And now I think you would all like to thank me. I'm sorry, not thank me. Would like to join me in thanking them. Just again, our Deputy Ambassador Ana Jimenez de la Hoz, Dr. Mira Wazir, Dr. Bedi Snene, Catherine MacDonald, and Dr. Stefan Verhulst. So we thank you very much for joining UNICEF's Frontier Data Network event. And that would be my one thing for you to do, which is if you do not already have good awareness of this, please make sure you follow that. That is a marvelous community for exactly these kinds of conversations, for networking, and exactly this kinds of community around practitioners who are really trying to pursue AI for social good and put children at the heart of it. We'd like to thank the Development Data Partnership, which is a collaboration between international organizations and technology companies, and they facilitate the efficient and responsible use of third-party data. So a lot of what we were talking about, they are our co-hosts for this evening's event. Thank you all, and hope you have enjoyed this, found it inspiring and cautionary, and will join us again for our future events. Thank you very much.